So I'm going to show you guys how to color different faces on an object. So here's my pawn, and if I right click and hold on this pawn and I go down to um, material attributes, you can see that my attribute editor pops up. And you want to go to the very end. I call this pieces light, MTRL for material. And you can see that the pawn is the type of shader that I selected for the pawn is a blend shader. And if we look at the pawn again, you can see that there's a bit of reflection. It's not super shiny, but it's not matte finish either. It's not like the board. There's a little bit of shine to it. Um, so
Are you recording this?
yes.
Oh,
So very simply, I mean, you could just click on the color, and then if I'm changing the whole color. If I do this, I can change it to red, yellow, green, whatever color you want. Um, but if I want to be more specific, and let's say I want to color the top of the head a different color, I'm going to go to the front view for a second. So I can just select the faces of the top. So I'm going to go face mode, and then I make a selection of just the faces on the top. And you want to make sure that you're only selecting those faces. So like I've said before, have two different viewers up, or you can go to the perspective and just kind of rotate around and make sure you have only what you want selected. Sometimes you might have accidentally selected some little square down here, and it's going to mess things up for you. All right, so I have all the faces there. Um, so if I want the faces to be a different color than the rest of the body, I need to create a new shader. So I'm going to right click and hold and say assign new material. And then this box pops up. And I'm going to again use blend. And I'm just going to call this head underscore. Actually, I shouldn't call it material. I should call it SD. Yeah, SHDR for shader. And let's say I want this head to be, I don't know, I can use the picker here and kind of move around. I don't know, something like that. And I'll say, yeah. So now it's selected, and you can see it's a different color than the rest of the body. And you can continue doing that with each piece. In fact, if let's say I wanted to make his shirt or his like he's not wearing a shirt, but where his torso would be, if I wanted to make that striped, I could just right click and hold, go to faces, and I'm going to zoom in here and hold down shift, and I'm going to select every other row of faces. And you can do individual faces if you want as well, and maybe the shirt doesn't go all the way down because he's got a little bit of a belly, so he's showing a little bit of his belly. So I'm going to right click and hold. Now I already have something called head shader. If I wanted that to be the same color of his face, I could just select that. And now he's got a striped shirt. So I mean, it's really crude. It's super simple. You're not creating material. You're not assigning an image to your object. We haven't even dealt with the but as far as just coloring the piece, if you wanted to color different parts, and you can have
Something happened to your mic.
you can't hear me anymore.
You got really quiet.
Maybe I slowly pulled away. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Um, yeah, so you can create as many of these as you want, different shaders. You can even, let's say, you wanted the inside stripes to be, I don't know, white and not blend. So I'm going to select these guys. One more? Yeah, I'll do two more. I right click and hold. I say assign new material like I did before. And this time instead of blend, I'm going to say Lambert. And I'm going to call this stripes shader, something like that. And then I'm going to click on the color and I want these to be white. And I click nothing. Now I want to compare the maroon colored stripes to the white color stripes. And you can see, hopefully you can see that the maroon color stripes are reflecting where the white color stripes, there's no reflection. It's just matte. They're just dull. So you can do that all over the body, or if you wanted to give it, I don't know, more shapes or something, you can just use the geometry you have and be more specific about what you select. But that's a super simple way to just get your pawn some colors. You guys have any questions about that?
Ben, projecting from a texture, can we do that? Like projecting it onto
Yeah, we're
the
not doing
mesh?
that today. I'm not showing you guys that today. We're gonna have a completely different lesson on texture maps because we're gonna use Arnold rendering, which means you have to have a completely different set of shaders and all that stuff. So we'll get to that, but we're not gonna do that today.
Right. So like in our projects, I'm just wondering like a planar projection instead of like going through and manually texturing each individual piece. Like, could
Yeah,
we,
so well,
that's acceptable?
the projection, I mean, so I'll just briefly show this to you guys. So we have these vertices, all these little magenta colored dots. Those are the XYZ coordinates for where these lines intersect. But there's another coordinate system that we'll get into later. Layouts, two side by side. And these are called the UVs. So if I go to the UV mode, you can see now they turn brown. So if you're ever accidentally in the UV mode and you think you're in vertices, in Maya, UVs are brown and vertices are magenta colored. But the UVs, they're basically, you work with them in this UV editor over here, and you can see it's just a two an XY coordinate system. It's not a three-dimensional coordinate system because there's not a UVW, there's just a UV. So each one of these UVs on the surface of this object only needs two coordinates. They don't need a third for volume. They're just using, it's as if they take this, essentially that's what it is. You take this pawn and you cut it and you like open it up like you would a globe or an orange, and you just flatten it, and that's what we're looking at here. So then you would, anyways, we'll get into that, but that's dealing with UV. So when you deal with planar projections or any other kind of projections, you're dealing more with UVs.
Quick question about UVs. I know you said you're not trying to get too far into it. I see that the UV grid was just squares. So does it mean that it stretches the image that you put on it if the geometry on the pawn has a stretch?
Question. So I mean, yeah, if I select these guys, so I have the UV selected. If I scale them, and this is kind of counterintuitive, but as I scale them down, well, it's not even going to show because I don't have if I had a texture map applied to the UVs, as the object would get, as UVs get smaller, closer together, the object actually spreads across them. It stretches across them. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, we'll get into all that stuff. In fact, I'll probably, for homework, I should probably just send you guys the Arnold rendering video to start watching the tutorial. But I figured we would see how far we got with the models before we got into UV maps and all that stuff. Any other questions? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this screen sharing and stop the recording.